This reminds me of a fruit tree. This reminds me of the old apple tree I have in my garden in the wine region. And quite old, my grandfather planted it years ago, decades ago. And a few years ago, the apple tree just had a few small and tiny apples. And then I thought, well, I have to change something. And I constructed an insect hotel. And guess what? The bees came back. And the year after, the fruit tree spoiled me with big, juicy apples. And ever since then, so apparently, biodiversity matters. And this brings us to the next session. And I would like to introduce to you Nicolas Chenel from the Joint Secretariat. Nicolas has been working with us for more than 6 years now. He is a very sporty colleague. He loves to run and to cycle. He likes word plays. He knows many languages and also very specific words in the different languages. He comes from Normandy, from France, and he's especially dedicated to the topic which comes now in the next session. And I would like to hand over to you, Nicolas, and please guide us through. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Christina, and hello to everyone. So, yes, I think first we should introduce a bit the session, and we're gonna go through some different aspects of our new program, and we would go together through different priorities. So the first one we will deal with is the first priority, and we'll talk about first the consequences of climate change in the Alpine region. So they are expected to be manifold and to represent a considerable challenge for our region. This will notably lead to an increase in natural hazards, not only in mountainous regions, but also in the forelands of the Alps, affecting notably settlements, infrastructure, but also human lives. In parallel, the Alpine biodiversity and ecological connectivity have been under pressure for many decades. Human activities, land use, exploitation of natural resources, and pollution have affected our landscape and led to habitat fragmentation and a loss of biodiversities. So this particular context calls for urgent action, but we are not starting from scratch. Our region can count since years on a lot of factors involved in these fields, and two of them are among us. So I have the pleasure to welcome Michaela Teich. Michaela is a forest scientist at the Austrian Research Center for Forest, with an expertise in the fields of protective forests, natural hazard risk, and ecosystem services. She's also a coordinator of the Snow and Avalanches Unit of the International Union of Forest Research Organization. And she was the lead partner of one of our projects, Green Risk for Alps, a project focusing on the development of ecosystem-based risk governance concepts. And I would also like to welcome Guido Plassmann. Guido is the director of Alpark, the Alpine network of protected area. He worked on several projects dealing with the management of protected areas, ecological connectivity, and sustainable regional development. So he is a lead partner of Albionet 2030, a project supporting biodiversity conservation, and in particular, the setup of integrative alpine wildlife and habitat management. So that's what we'll be talking in the next minutes. But first of all, we have a video which will summarize, to put in a nutshell, what will be the new priorities of our program. So I think now we can launch it. So I hope you enjoy this few minutes of presentation. And before we look to the future, it's worth looking also back in the past at what we have already achieved so far. And each of my guests for this session, so Michaela and Guido, have been running Interreg Alpine Space projects these last years. And I will start with some simple question to each of them, and maybe I will start with Guido. Guido, could you please share with us what is the main result or the main achievement of your project, Albionet? And in the end, what are you the most proud of? And what has the change in the Alpine area thanks to your project which were brought to our program area? So in a few words, you can explain us what Albionet did in the last years.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicola. And thanks for your introduction. I think to tell and to say, underline that the climate change is a major problem for the Alps is true, but biodiversity is the second big crisis we have. And for this reason, we are really thankful that the Alpine Space program allowed quite a lot of activities and projects concerning more protection of biodiversity and more work about ecological connectivity. That's the basement, one of the basements for better biodiversity protection. And the project Albionet 2030, indeed, I think the most important result is that we have now a very good planning basis for future activities. We now where are the priority areas to act, to do more for connectivity as a main feature for the protection of biodiversity. And for the first time, I think the whole Alpine space was included in such a study of connectivity, and we could identify, the map here is showing it, that we can devise the Alpine space and the Alpine space into three main categories, what we call the SACAs. Strategic Alpine connectivity areas, the first one which is quite very well intact, the second one which needs some intervention, and the third one more or less around the Alps, a very important belt around the Alps, which is very much urbanized, very much and intensively used, so that there is so much fragmentation that no migration of species is possible anymore. And with this work, we could present for the first time a basis for future work on biodiversity and ecological connectivity for the whole space. Very important is the interface between the OSL space and the Alpine Convention area. Here, this is probably the part of the main challenges of the whole space. And here a lot of work should be concentrated during the next years. Another important feature of Albionet was, of course, that for the first time we could proceed to a real comparison between the hunting systems. If we speak about wildlife management, then we need to know about the hunting system of the different Alpine countries. This was not done so far. The work here was showing now the different hunting systems. There are different hunting systems in the Alps. It's not at all comparable. Different hunting seasons. Nothing is harmonized between the Alpine countries, and different structures of management of the hunting systems. I think that's a very important other feature. And then other, but last not least, result is a large work about social conflict, social nature-mankind conflicts. So to propose some toolkits to better solve issues which are conflicting between the nature and human use of the Alpine space. These are three main features of Albionet, and if you ask what we are most proud of it, I think it's really the case that we have now a planning basis, and the most interesting tool for this is that we have a very performant tool for simulations, and that's the ECAMI, which we have developed already in former projects, eConnect, quite a long time ago. And you see that some results of the Alpine Space program remains and are used even 10 years later still, and are more and more developed. And I think that's a very important issue as well, that the program promotes as well tools which are made for a long time. This would be the first part of my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Guido. It's very nice to see that, yeah, the durability of results stemming from our projects. And now, what about green risk for Alps? Michaela, could you please tell us a bit more about the main achievement of your projects, of your project?
Yeah, thank you very much. First for the invitation that I can present here in the name of all the project partners, the Green Risk for Alps project, and talk about the main results and achievements, but also maybe a little bit about the footprints we left and what we see are the main challenges in the future. So I think our main results and achievements and where we are proud of is that through that collaboration of interdisciplinary partners from like 12 institutions, we were able to prepare state-of-the-art information in a way that is available and can be used, but more important, to develop a set of decision support tools for risk-based protective forest management as a part of an integrated management of ecosystem as part of an integrated and ecosystem-based natural hazard risk management in the alpine space. And so these decision support tools are freely available. They can be accessed through our homepage. And just to name a few examples, we developed the Protective Forest Assessment Tool, which is an online web platform allowing to look at forest-based solutions compared to technical protection measures and also avoidance measures for natural hazards such as snow avalanches, rockfall, and shallow landslides for a specific area. And this tool is available in 5 languages. So it can also accessed by practitioners who are not super fluent in English. And a second example is our simulation tool, FlowPy, for modeling natural hazards. But in particular, this tool can be used and applied and adapted very easily to model protective forests or forest with a protective function, and it's already tested and applied in different alpine space countries. And then one other thing going a little bit away from the modeling of natural hazards and natural hazard risk is the rapid risk appraisal, which was developed as a method to integrate stakeholder knowledge and to use stakeholder knowledge to get a view on the current risk management situation in a certain area. And this method, for example, is already used by PlanAlp to compare the different risk management strategies of the Alpine Convention countries. There are many more. You can find them on our website, and I think I speak for all the partners that we are very happy to get to this stage. The second part of the question was what changed in the alpine space due to the project. This is always hard to say like what really changed, but I think I can be, or I am certain that we did leave a footprint. For example, Green Risk for Alps is an example case in the latest report on nature-based solutions for disaster risk management of the European Environmental Agency. So there are like best practice examples shown there. But also, I think we contributed a lot to harmonize to the harmonization of risk management strategies. And with harmonization, I don't mean that we need to do in every alpine space country the same thing, but we have different starting points. So there are countries which deal with natural hazard and protective forest management for decades. Other countries just start to develop their regulations and guidelines. And so, for example, the results of Green Risk for Alps contributed tremendously in Slovenia to adapt some legislation and to be able to model protective forests for the country, while in other countries, maybe Green Risk for Alps left smaller footprints. But at the end, I think we moved through Green Risk for Alps towards that goal of a harmonization of managing natural hazard risks in a harmonized way in the Alpine space.
Thanks a lot for these elements. And so just I would like to take a little break to invite the audience to use Slido for asking questions about this topic, or to our participants. Just for at a later stage, we will collect them and share their question with you, Guido and Michaela. And I think we have also a video illustrating a bit the outcomes of Green Risks for Alps, and all the result of the project have been taken on board by different stakeholders. I think we can now launch this little video.
Slovenia Forest Service joined the Green Risks for Alps project with the primary goal to transfer scientific knowledge into the practice. We integrate models and maps of protection forests in strategic forest management plans. For Slovenia Forest Service, the various tools developed within the project are essential to improve management of protection forests.
Protection Forest Assessment Tool, as we call FAT, is a hazard and economic model that's used to estimate the value and the effectiveness of protection forests against landslides, rockfall and avalanches.
Und je besser die Grundlagen sein, je aktueller die Grundlagen sein, umso mehr kann ich mich auf die eigentliche Planungsarbeit konzentrieren, nämlich Maßnahmen daraus abzuleiten. Und die Maßnahmen sollen effizient, ressourcenschonend und zielgenau, treffsicher sein. Und da helfen natürlich solche Grundlagen, die in einer Gesamtschau anderer Fachrichtungen diese Informationen gut darstellen, die helfen sehr.
Das FED-Tool finde ich gerade aber auch für politische Entscheidungsträger für extrem relevant, ja, und auch für künftige mögliche Förderungen, die notwendig sein werden, weil der Wirtschaftswald auf Dauer die Funktionen ohne Kostenersatz nicht erfüllen wird können. Glaube ich, dass es da ganz entscheidend ist, auch volkswirtschaftlich Maßnahmen rechtzeitig zu ergreifen. Und ich sehe in dem FED-Tool die Anfänge eines ganz wichtigen Instrumentes für politische Entscheidungsträger, aber auch für den Waldbewirtschafter.
It's always very nice to see how results are directly taken over by decision makers and experts, and how they can concretely have a direct impact in our region. So a lot of interesting results have been reached until now. And maybe now, in your view, Michaela and Guido, could you please tell us more on what remains to be done in your respective field, and which challenges should still be addressed in our region? So maybe, Michaela, you can start this time.
Yes, and thanks for also showing these little statements from the stakeholders. I hope that gave the audience also a little better picture of what we've done in Green Risk for Alps. And the remaining challenges, I think, from the project, from gathering information and from working on those tools, it became clear that the assessment and the modeling of the protective effects of the forest against natural hazards, that means how the forest actually influences the hazard potential, is still, or there's still a lot of uncertainties involved there. So I think we do need to keep working in this collaboration of experts from different countries to collect data or to combine existing data in a standardized way, so that we constantly can improve this assessment and our models, so that we can then use these models to estimate the consequences of changing environmental conditions and cascading effects. And with changing environmental conditions in the with regards to natural hazard risk, I mean, of course, climate change, because this will change our protected forest in terms of species compositions, but also in the increase of natural disturbances such as bog beetle outbreaks or wind throw, which we already see, but also the socio-economic changes which influence the natural hazard risk, because when we talk about risk, this always involves a damage potential, so something which is at risk. And if we continue to build more, to enlarge our ski areas, to also influence the ecosystems and the nature, we influence that risk, and we have there also a big potential to control that risk. I said shortly before, I think the disturbances, forest disturbances, and their influence on protected forest will dominate the discussion over the next decades, and also the research over the next decades, because like I said, we see those changes already. But I also think that synergies and trade-offs with other ecosystem services, such as biodiversity, or when seeing what Guido talked about before, about wildlife management and so on, I think we need to connect closer there, and to also look at these synergies a little bit more in detail. And at the end, also what I learned from the project a lot, that a continuous work on a targeted knowledge transfer, this is always a challenge for every research project, and something we really need to focus on in every project, to raise the awareness of protected forests, to educate people, like we also saw in the talk before, to educate people, and that they see the need for that kind of research and also support it.
Okay, thanks a lot. And what about you, Guido? How do you see things for the future?
If I speak about biodiversity protection and more biodiversity protection, I think we need more transdisciplinary work. And I would like to share two other slides with you. The first one is going directly to another project where we are project partner. It's called Open Space Alps, and that's already goes to a kind of implementation. That's we need to work with special planners. We need to find out where the last really what we called open spaces in the Alps, to better conserve them. And for this reason, we made a quite sophisticated analysis about the Alpine space and the OSL space to show where are those spaces with a, let's say, spatial development of infrastructure below 10 or 20%, what we defined as open spaces. As we saw as well, and that's quite important, that if we speak about protection, biodiversity protection, we have all protected systems, which are really strong in the Alps beyond 1,500 meters. 87% of protected areas with a strong status are beyond 1,500 meters sea level. And this shows that we need a cooperation with special planning, with the political level, and so on, to go as well to deeper areas to really have a protection of biodiversity all over the space, because the highest biodiversity is not on the glaciers. So it's really important to do this, and we need to break down these walls between the different disciplines and to work not only about administrative units. Here you see watersheds. These are limits by watersheds, and that's quite closer to the natural space, of course, than administrative borders. And the last slide, I think this will give an impression how Alpine Space projects as well continue in the time, because here we used data from Alpionet and we use them in Open Space Alps. And of course, we found out that most of the, what we called before the SACA1s, or the areas with still a quite good functioning ecological connectivity, are always open spaces. But open spaces are quite more, that's all the green parts. And that's not the main challenge, because that's anyway clear. But the main challenge, if you look to the table, then we have what we call the SACA 2. So these areas, if you remember, where an intervention is necessary to conserve them. These are mostly areas linking SACA 1 areas. So they're important. And they have 61% of the open spaces. So here's the main challenge. We can really identify today where is the main challenge to work with special planners and other disciplines to conserve such spaces important for biodiversity for the future. And last map, what you can see here, if we work with trend scenarios, with demographic evolution, with projection of infrastructure development, what we can do with European data today, then we can even say where will be a disruption in, let's say, 2050. And these are the red parts. And if we make some more protection, on SACA 1 or SACA 2, to give this example again, then we can even say where we can save or where we can avoid such disruptive effects of the loss of open spaces. The analysis is quite complex. Of course, we have not the time to go into details, but we are ready for any person interested, of course, to have a deeper exchange after the conference or whatever. But these are really possibilities now, what we have to show a little bit future evolutions and to have really a planning basis for biodiversity issues, and think that's really important. And this goes to the implementation if then the measures are taken. For this reason, we're working always as well with pilot regions to verify these things on the ground, at least in the pilot regions, because only with mapping and only with scenarios, it's not enough. That's quite clear, I think. Thank you.
Many thanks, Guido, for your answer. And now I will ask Elisa, is Slido boiling of questions? Do we have a lot of questions popping up?
Yes, indeed, we do have many questions which have been raised. Some are very specific, some not. Since we don't really have much time, I will maybe now pose the one that actually got more votes so far, which is, do the speakers have new project on risk and natural hazards? We saw climate change has huge impacts in the Alpine Valley, especially projects linked to rivers. So I leave you the word, maybe just a brief answer regarding this, so we don't lose too much time.
Okay, brief answer. Of course, like in the consortium or also beyond this, we are talking about new projects, or we're trying to shape new projects concerning natural hazard risk. And there is a very important point in that question, which is regarding torrential hazards. In Green Risk for Alps, for example, we haven't looked at it. We focused on gravitational natural hazards, but actually torrential hazards such as flooding will also be very much influenced through climate change, and also their interaction with disturbances. So I think this is a hot topic. I can't go into detail yet what we in the consortium have specifically planned, but this is also an issue which was raised at the end of Green Risk for Alps, for example, where future work needs to be done.
And then maybe one quick question to Guido. How do you ensure that projects dealing with both climate change and biodiversity are well coordinated, in the sense that you don't have interference but mutual support of each other?
It's a difficult question, and there's not enough time to give a satisfying answer, I fear. But we cannot always speak about a link of biodiversity and climate change in all fields of biodiversity. There are things which are really only concerning biodiversity, totally independent from the climate change. But most of the issues, quite most, are effect of biodiversity change or loss is affected by climate change. And that's why we worked so strongly about this ecological connectivity, because it's an answer to the climate change. It allows species to migrate better to the north, but as well in altitude. But the problem of the altitude is, after a while, you can go higher. It's just the end, and the mountains are not higher than anymore. And that's there are a lot of things where we can work at the same time to adapt or to mitigate both problems, but there are a lot of things we need really specific answers for biodiversity because they're absolutely not linked to the climate change.
Thank you for this, Guido. Maybe one last question, which I would pose to Nicola at this point. What will be new now with a new programming period, and what is actually foreseen for priority 1?
So there are a lot of things foreseen, so it's hard to summarize everything in a few minutes, but as mentioned by our two guests, there is a certain emergency to fix our broken relationship with nature. So our program has addressed this topic since its creation, but still there are a lot of things that still remain to be done. So our program is looking to promote climate change adaptation measures in the Alpine region. So the idea is to reinforce the adaptive capacity of our region to cope with the impacts of climate change and establish climate services to foster resilience. Together with these adaptation measures, the program will also support solutions for risk prevention and disaster resilience. This will encompass disaster monitoring, warning, and response systems concerning all kinds of natural hazards. In order to strengthen the alpine biodiversity and ecosystem services, our program will focus on the development of multifunctional green and blue infrastructures network. We will support nature-based solutions and encourage innovative planning methodologies. So I would invite you to have a look at our cooperation program to read more into details what will be the content of our new priority 1. There are still a lot of things to do. So new challenges are emerging and the consequences of climate change are increasingly perceptible. So let's keep the past together. Let's mobilize all relevant forces for preventing and preserving our environment, adapting our societies and making them more resilient to future threats. So we as program, we are standing next to you to address together these challenges. So let's do it all together. And I would like to thank you, Guido and Michaela, for their contributions. And I think now it's time to move to the next part of our program. We're a bit running out of time. Thank you.
So thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Elisa. Thank you guys for your statements on priority 1. Christina, what we do now is affects on the next generation. So I wonder what the young people are thinking about.
Let's ask one of them. So we're very happy that we have Tim Sung with us. He's a student from Austria, studies geography and politics, and he's very interested in the future of the Alpine area, and that's why he's very much engaged in working together with other young people, and he's member of the Youth Parliament of the Macro-Regional Strategy USALP. And Tim, I may pass over the question of Marco to you. So where do you see urgent need for Alpine-wide cooperation after what you've heard so far? And I kindly ask you to give it to us in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be with you guys today. So thanks everyone so far for the contributions. From my point of view as a young person living in the Alps, yeah, a big problem is mobility. Aside from the biodiversity and climate change issues that have been said already, creating a well-connected public transport system doesn't only help young people explore the region, but also provides green transport links to tackle the climate change problem, and also brings the Alpine region closer together so that we can create a stronger economic unit. So it helps the younger people explore their region better and creates more opportunities for us in the future as well as combating the climate change issue, which is very prevalent today. So yeah, from our point of view, that's one of the big issues that we need to tackle.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for this input. Well, I think and experienced that we have heard a lot of information. We've seen a lot of slides, facts and figures, and made a quick run through the diversity of the Alpine area and what is in the new program in this first priority. I would suggest that we have a break now to get some fresh air, a cup of coffee, whatever you feel like you need now, and let us come back in 10 minutes from now. So thank you and see you later then.